Okay, so imagine this. You win a court case. The judge orders the person who wronged you to pay up over 1 million pesos. You'd think justice is served, right? But what if there's a law? A law that was actually designed to help the country's economy that makes collecting that money legally impossible. This is the incredible story of a fight for justice, where the biggest obstacle was the law itself. So let's get right to it. Back in 1990, after a truly horrific crime, a Philippine court did the right thing. It awarded a huge sum in damages to a 12-year-old girl and her family. This was supposed to be the compensation, the official legal acknowledgement of everything she had been through. You'd think, okay, that's the end of the legal fight.
But it wasn't. Not even close. See, the criminal, who was an American tourist, had his money sitting in a foreign currency deposit account. And it turns out there was a specific Philippine law put in place to attract foreign investment that basically put an impenetrable shield around that money. So the victim had a court judgment, but the cash? Completely untouchable.
And this, right here, created a huge legal and moral problem. It's the question at the very heart of this case. What do you do? What happens when a law, followed exactly as written, leads to something that feels profoundly, deeply unjust? To really understand what was at stake, we need to go back to the beginning. We have to talk about the crime that kicked off this whole unbelievable chain of events. So in early February of 1989, a 12-year-old girl, Karen Salvacion, was lured into an apartment by an American tourist named Greg Bartelli. And for 4 days, she was held there against her will. It was horrifying. Bartelli was arrested, and the family immediately filed both criminal and civil cases. But just a little over a week after that, he managed to escape from jail and just vanished. He became a fugitive. Now, because he'd escaped, the criminal case was basically stuck. But the civil case, that could still move forward. The court heard all the terrible details and found Martelli liable. They ordered him to pay over 1 million pesos in damages to Karen and her family. This was a clear-cut legal victory, a formal recognition of the immense harm he had caused. So, with this final judgment in hand, the Salvacion family tried to collect the money they were owed. They knew Bartelli had a dollar account at a local bank, so it should have been simple. But this is where they slammed right into a legal brick wall. The family's lawyer tried to garnish Bartelli's dollar account. The bank, China Banking Corporation, just said no. And the reason? A law called the Foreign Currency Deposit Act. The wording of this law was just brutally clear. It said these kinds of deposits were totally exempt from any court order. That included the very court order meant to give Karen her damages. Just to be sure, the family's lawyer even wrote to the central bank, hoping for some kind of loophole. The response they got back was just chilling. They were told the law was absolute, no exceptions. They even said, yeah, it might seem harsh, but it is the law. It really looked like a total dead end. But you know what? The Salvacion family refused to take that as the final answer. They weren't giving up. They took their fight to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. And they didn't just challenge the bank's decision, they went bigger. They challenged the law itself. They came at it with 4 really powerful arguments. First, they said it violated due process. I mean, what's the point of winning in court if the law makes it impossible to ever collect? It makes the whole judgment feel meaningless. Second, it violated equal protection. Why should a foreign criminal get special protection for his money that a Filipino citizen wouldn't? Third, and this is a big one, it created a safe haven for criminals, allowing a fugitive to use the law to hide his money from his victim. And finally, they argued that the Monetary Board went too far, that it overstepped its authority by creating a rule that completely blocked the path to justice. So now the Supreme Court has this classic legal dilemma on its hands. You have the plain, black and white text of a law on one side, and the pursuit of real justice on the other. And instead of just reading the words on the page, the court decided to dig deeper, to look at the reason this law was even created in the first place. They started by asking a really fundamental question, a question that would end up unlocking this entire case. Who was this law actually for? What was its original purpose? So the court did its homework. It looked into the history of the law and found that its purpose was purely economic. It was all about attracting legitimate foreign money from lenders, from long-term investors, to help build up the Philippine economy. The whole point was to get capital to flow into the country for development, not to give criminals a place to hide their cash. And this right here, this comparison just perfectly captures the core of the court's thinking. On one side, you've got who the law was meant for, a legit investor contributing to the economy. And on the other side, you've got Greg Bartelli, a temporary tourist and now a fugitive from justice, who was just using the bank as a convenient place to stash his money while he committed terrible crimes. The court saw a total mismatch between the law's purpose and how it was being used here. So, after establishing that crucial distinction, the Supreme Court was ready to hand down its final landmark decision. Now, here's the really brilliant part. The court didn't just throw out the whole law and call it unconstitutional. It did something much smarter. It declared that the law was simply inapplicable to Greg Bartelli. The court said that given the horrific facts of this case and Bartelli's status as just a transient tourist, applying the law's protection to him would make a mockery of its true purpose. The court backed up its ruling with this really profound legal principle from the Philippine Civil Code. It basically says that when a law is confusing or when applying it would lead to an obviously unfair result, the courts have to assume that the lawmakers intended for right and justice to win out in the end. It's a powerful idea that the rules of law can't be used to defeat the whole point of law, which is justice. So what's the big takeaway here? What's the lasting impact of this case? It's this. The spirit of the law, its real purpose, can actually be more important than its literal black and white text, especially when blindly following the words on the page would protect a criminal and lead to a massive injustice. In those moments, the courts have a duty to look deeper. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. This case really forces us to ask a big question about how law should work. Should any law ever be written so rigidly, so absolutely, that it can't bend even a little bit to prevent a clear and undeniable injustice? It's a tension that you'll find at the very heart of any legal system.